We finally come to the video where we're going to create our first DAX calculations. So let's go ahead and get started and open our Power BI desktop file. So we have in front of us our Power BI desktop file. To start with, I'm going to go ahead and change this chart that we have here, and I'm going to switch that from a clustered column chart to a table chart. So as we create our calculations, we can add it to our table. And as you can see in Power BI, very easy to switch them. And I'm going to open this up a little bit just to make room for the other columns. Perfect. Now the easiest way to create any DAX calculation is to come up here to the fields list on the right and right click on the table you want to add it to. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to select New Measure here. And that's going to open up a new measure in our list. And if we come over here to the left, we'll see that in a formula bar, there is the word measure followed by the equal sign. So this will be very similar to creating a calculation in Excel, but just a whole lot better at other types of advanced transformations. Now let's start really simple and just create a sales amount calculation or total sales. So I'm going to type out total sales equals, and just like the Excel function, this will be sum, and you're going to get something called IntelliSense that down here opens up this list and lets you pick a calculation to use. So I want to use sum. And instead of putting a cell reference in here, I'm going to specify the column that I want to calculate, which will be the sales amount column. There we are. And I'm going to close my parentheses, and then I'm going to hit enter. Perfect. Now pay attention over here. You'll notice that total sales is showing up in my fields list underneath my sales table, but it didn't actually create a column. It only created calculation that is added into this almost like a folder where it's just placing it as a storage location. To confirm that, we come over to our data tab and take a look at our sales table. You'll notice that there is no total sales column anywhere in here. So it didn't create a new column and it didn't add much size to the file itself. Each time you create a new measure, it only adds a few kilobytes of data. It's really, really tiny. So let's come back to our report view. And now what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to take my total sales and I'm going to add that to my value section here on my table and get rid of that naked column. Now in general, as a best practice, whenever you're wanting to show a calculation, meaning a number that's aggregated, a min, a max, sum, average, anything like that, you want to use a DAX measure. And we'll see later on some other good reasons why, but just know that that's a very common and often considered best practice to do so. Now there is some data in here, just as we're looking at this a little bit, that's kind of extraneous. We don't need some of this extra data. Specifically, the cents that are on the dollar isn't really needed at this level. If we're showing $3 million of data, we don't need 49 cents at the end. So we can actually format that by coming up to modeling. And now it's important too, just to come up and look at the fields list for a second. If you want to edit the DAX calculation that you've written, make sure that you've selected it so there's a little yellow box around it. Now, if you take a look at the modeling tab up here, you'll notice that there is highlighted in the middle under formatting settings that you can apply to this. So I'm going to change this format from general to currency. Almost there, and now go ahead and get rid of that decimal point. Perfect. Now taking a look at our visual, we'll see that it has now formatted it and removed it there. Another benefit to this is, as many times as we use this DAX calculation, it will continue to reapply that default formatting, so we don't have to set it one at a time over and over again, saving us a lot of valuable time. Now, along the lines of hiding those key columns that I mentioned earlier, whenever you create a DAX calculation like this, you don't actually need to have the original column on this fields list showing anymore, because this is what you're going to be using from now on whenever you add this data to a visualization. So you can similarly hide the sales amount column or any column that is used in a calculation. So I'm going to right click sales amount and select hide. Perfect. Now we've seen how to add one of them. The other two calculations that I want to add for this video is showing you also how to do the order count, which we will need as well. And then finally, I want to end with how to create that average order amount, which will allow us to be able to determine what the average sale amount was per each order. And it will help for that calculation to already have the total sales calculated first and the order calculated first, as we'll see here in a minute. So to create my next one, I'm going to right click sales, and I'm again going to select new measure. And I'm going to come back up to that formula bar, and I'm going to call this one order count. And what I would like that to be is going to be a distinct count of my sales key. There we are. And again, what this is taken is the column name right here. Distinct count counts the number of distinct values in a column. And specifically, I want to do that on sales key. Now, there's a good reason that I'm doing this here, is depending on the type of your data, your sales key might not be distinct or not. If sale 1 had 4 sublines beneath it, meaning 4 orders for various different products or things like that, that value would no longer be distinct. So we can't do account rows or anything else like that. It's important to be able to get a distinct list of my orders so I can appropriately divide that against my total sales amount. So that's why I'm doing a distinct on my sales key, to remove any other duplicated rows for my sales data if there were line item numbers. Hit enter, and I'm going to put the 1000 separator in here as the comma. Perfect. As we take a look over here on our fields list, order count is in my list. I'm going to add that next to my total sales, and it shows up right here. There is my order count. Now, just to demo a little bit, there's no option in that drop-down list to do any kind of comparison where I can say, have my total sales divided by order count. There's no direct option just to click a button and have that applied, but we can compare the two values against each other in a new DAX calculation. So to create that third one, let's go ahead again and right-click on Sales and select New Measure one more time. Come up here to the left. I'm going to call this Average Order Amount. And now this calculation is going to do a couple of really cool things. To start with, there's a function called divide. And as I type that out, let's look at this function name. It is a safe divide function with the ability to handle divide by 0 cases. So it's essentially wrapping an if-error statement built into this. Those of you who've used Excel and had to write those before know that cell formulas can get messy when you ever hit a divide by 0 error. This accounts for that without ever erroring out. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to divide total sales. And here's the important part. Do you notice right now that my numerator is referencing the total sales calculation that I've already written? I don't have to say sum of sales amount anymore, like this, because I already have a calculation for that. DAX can build upon each other like a branching tree. So once you have base calculations, you can continually reference them over and over again, kind of allowing a single point of contact with your data model. And that's what we'd like to try to avoid as good practices, is minimize the amount of contact any of these calculations have with the original column, so they can build upon each other like layers of a house, branches in a tree, Lego blocks, any of those analogies that would work for you. So I'm going to divide total sales, and what it does too is it gets a nice color code. The function names get blue, DAX calculations will get purple. So total sales here, and then my denominator will be order count, and then all I have to do, because I have an option, if you look here, to provide an alternative result, but I don't need to do that if I don't want anything to be returned. I want it to be blank. So all I have to do is close that. If it ever hits a divide by 0 error, now it will just be blank instead. So I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to change that now to a percentage, and let's change that to 1 decimal. Perfect. And now let's come ahead and add that to my table as well. And as you can see, the percentages look a little bit off, and that's because I changed it to the wrong type of formatting. What's really nice is if you do that, or if at any time you need to, you can always update it. So let's go ahead and quickly fix that. Going to come up here to the top ribbon, change that from percentage to currency, because average order amount will be dollars. And similarly, I'm going to get rid of the decimal points here, put that at 0. There we are. Now we can see on our right our average order amount for any of those. And the great thing too about having all 3 of these in my table is the fact that I can do kind of quick and easy math against them. The total sales of 38 million divided by 26,000 equals 1,141, and down the list. So we can see that it is calculating correctly. Now, one thing I want us to take a look at and think about a little bit. So if we look over here on our right, on our fields list, we have 3 calculations that are all equally spread out among our table. So these tables organize themselves alphabetically, and there's not really any other way to change the sort order in here. Unfortunately, there's no way either under your search option to filter to just calculations. So what we're going to do in our next video is actually learn how to create a table that will hold all of our DAX calculations in there and kind of better organize them in our model so they're not just scattered throughout our tables in a random alphabetical order, which to me is a very non-optimized organization method. So with that being said, I'll see you in our next video.